Japanese role-playing games, also known as JRPGs, are easily one of, if not my favourite video game genre. There's just something great about sitting down with a JRPG, knowing you're about to head out on a sprawling adventure of 50 plus hours that I won't ever get tired of. And while the genre does have its cliches, it's also kind of what I unashamedly enjoy about it. So whether you're a long-time fan, or somebody who's just getting into the genre, we're going to take a look at 10 modern JRPGs that you must play. Let's start off with one of the older ones on the list, the remaster of Ni no Kuni Wrath of the White Witch, which was originally released in the West in 2013. One of the fantastic things about the game is the legendary Studio Ghibli's involvement, whereby they created the anime sequences and served as the game's overall art style inspiration. The story follows Oliver, a young boy in the 1960s who is struggling with the death of his mother and is whisked away to another world in a quest to save a sage that in turn might bring his mother back to life. Combat-wise, it's somewhat similar to Pokemon. You collect creatures called familiars and command them in battle, but don't let looks deceive you, it can be surprisingly difficult in the latter half of the game. Next up is Octopath Traveler, that despite being a modern JRPG, harkens back to the SNES days of the genre, utilising carefully crafted pixel art throughout, mixing it with today's effects and a tilt-shift perspective that lends itself to an extremely pleasing aesthetic, resulting in something that feels both new and nostalgic. There are 8 characters, each with their own backstory. You pick who you want to play as at the beginning as you set out on a journey and recruit the other characters as you go along, deciding when and whose story you tackle next, which offers a lot of freedom in how you experience your adventure. The game is currently on Game Pass, so if you're a subscriber, there's no reason not to at least give this stellar blast from the past a try. Moving on, we have Dragon Quest XI Echoes of an Elusive Age. In many ways, Dragon Quest XI is very much a classic JRPG, but with modern visuals. Whereas a lot of JRPGs have made the switch to real-time combat, Dragon Quest remains very traditional with a turn-based system. If there was one criticism that I and many fans had, was that the MIDI music can be quite tiring. However, a definitive edition was thankfully released that included the option for an orchestral soundtrack, among other additions, such as the option to play with classic sprite visuals. Much like with Octopath Traveler, it's available to play on Game Pass, so make sure you check this one out if you haven't already. There's few games that have been requested for a remake as much as Final Fantasy VII, and while it took a long time, Part 1 dropped in 2020 and didn't disappoint, providing jaw-dropping visuals, great voice acting, and a redesigned combat system that captures the fighting prowess just as well as in the 2005 film Advent Children. Well, the story is now split into 3 games, and they've decided to make some pretty drastic story changes, which has rustled some feathers. I personally really like not knowing exactly what is going to happen in the next 2 parts, and have high expectations for what they will accomplish with them. The Tales series has some of my favourite games like Symphonia and Vesperia, but I find the more recent entries in this series to not be quite as good until the latest release, Tales of Arise. The story may start out a little cliche, with the main character having amnesia, however the story is genuinely quite good, with a focus on oppression and liberation. The move to the Unreal 4 engine makes a big difference, and the visuals sport a watercolour painting aesthetic that looks quite frankly amazing. Arise is currently the fastest selling in the series now, and for good reason. If you like fast, frantic action JRPGs, this one pushes all the right buttons. When Yakuza moved on from the cast of the previous entries and changed the battle system to turn-based, the sequel could have been a massive failure. There was certainly a lot of concern amongst fans prior to release, but the result proved to be a worthy entry in the series. The new protagonist Ichiban is a great addition. The turn-based combat still manages to feel fast-paced and frantic, and there's plenty of that crazy charm you expect from a Yakuza title. While I'm probably in the minority, I personally can't stand reading subtitles, especially in a series like Yakuza where there is so much dialogue, so the inclusion of a dub this time around, and a good one at that, majorly increased my enjoyment of the game. Next up, we have Fire Emblem Three Houses, which is quite different from the other entries because of how tactical it is. As the name suggests, you pick one of 3 houses to align with that will impact how the story unfolds as it goes on, each with different interests and motivations. In fact, making important decisions is a big part of the game, deciding how you'll spend each day, such as battling in side missions, exploring the monastery, conducting seminars to raise certain skills, and simply managing your students as best as possible. If you are looking for a slightly slower, more thought-provoking JRPG, this is definitely the one for you, especially if you choose to play in classic mode where character deaths are permanent, placing even more weight on your actions and decisions. The original Xenoblade Chronicles was a great game, but it looks pretty dated by today's standards, especially the muddy character models. Thankfully, Nintendo released a definitive edition of the game in 2020 that spruced up the visuals, added new story content, and provided a number of quality of life improvements that made it even better. The game follows Shulk, who comes into the possession of a special sword called the Monado that grants him both the ability of foresight and the power needed to take on the formidable Mechon, a race of mechanical beings that are a threat to all of those on Shulk's home, a dormant titan called Bionis. The plot may sound simplistic, but like with most JRPGs, there's plenty of twists and turns along the way. The gameplay is interesting in that you deal out normal attacks automatically, but you can unleash special attacks called arts that work around a cooldown timer. It's how you utilize these and expose your enemies' weaknesses that will turn the tide of battle. Next is Nier Automata, a game as weirdly as fantastic as its name. Automata is essentially part hack and slash, part shooter, and part RPG, as you are placed in the shoes of 2B, an android that roams in a post-apocalyptic Earth after humanity has fled to the moon. That's all I'm going to say about the premise, because it's something you really need to experience yourself to appreciate it. What I will say, however, is that the atmosphere and music is absolutely fantastic and worth noting. It's no doubt something you'll catch yourself simply admiring on more than one occasion. When you reach the end credits, you might feel a little underwhelmed, but unlike most games, it's far from over. A second playthrough will have you play from the perspective of your companion 9S, filling in many of the gaps from the first playthrough, with a third playthrough serving as an epilogue that further concludes the story, with a total of 26 endings to come across throughout the journey. It's currently available on PlayStation, Xbox and PC, but a Switch version is coming soon. When it comes to JRPGs, Persona 5 Royal is a standard that everything else is compared to. Persona 5 takes the already incredible original P5 and adds more content and gameplay to it. The game tells the story of a high school student wrongly convicted and sent to a new school in Tokyo. It's here he discovers the metaverse. Together with others he meets along the way, they form the Phantom Thieves, a group of vigilantes that make it their job to change the hearts of corrupt individuals in the real world. Persona 5 has a really unique blend of gameplay. Half of your time is spent living an average teenager's life, forming relationships, studying and having fun, with the other half in the metaverse tackling enemies in turn-based combat. It's a great mix that makes it really unique. Artistically it is extremely stylish, the voice acting is fantastic, and coming in at over 100 hours, you'll be kept busy for months. Originally it was a PlayStation exclusive, but in October it's making its way to the PC, Xbox and Nintendo Switch. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe and hit the bell icon for a notification each time I upload new content. Thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you in the next video.